Okay, superb. So good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Let's begin this session. Welcome to all of you. Hi, my name is Amit Pathare, and I am the moderator of this session today. A very warm welcome to everyone for this very important topic on the decarbonization journey for India. If you look at where India is today, it has already been successful in reaching more than 100 gigawatts of renewables, but that's not the whole story, and in fact, it's just the beginning of the story. India has massive ambitions of reaching 500 gigawatts of installed renewables by 2030. Of which about 280 gigawatts will be solar and 140 gigawatts at least will be wind. In addition, they've got a target of an annual production of 5 million tons of green hydrogen, which is in the gas sector, and they are looking at more stringent targets for energy efficiency. Now, all of these areas are indeed just one sub-segment of the whole impetus for sustainability, and that's why we've got a fantastic panel for you here today. So before I introduce the panel, maybe one quick note about the organizers of this event. So the event is being organized by the Franco Indienne Chamber of Commerce here in Paris, and of whom I am the vice president. It is headed by Madame Benedict Brouillard, who is also with us today. So coming to the panelists in alphabetical order, I have with me Jaideep Sandhu, who is the CTO of the ENGIE Renewables Global Business. I have Laurent Wolffsheim, who is the SVP of Strategy, Growth and Finance in Total Gas Renewables and Power. And I have Venkat Garimella of Schneider Electric, who is the VP and Strategy and Sustainability in the India zone. A very warm welcome to all of you. And maybe I can just will allow you to introduce yourself in a bit more detail. So let me pass once again in alphabetical order to Jaideep.
Thank you very much, Amit, and good morning and good afternoon to all of you. So thank you for having me on this panel, Amit. So it's an interesting topic and a very important one, considering the size of the Indian population, its place in the world economy, and the importance of greening the fleet in India and moving towards the net zero transition. So to very briefly introduce myself, I've been in the power industry for about 34 years, of which 27 have been with ENGIE, or its former names, like GDF says.
Yes.
And I started my life, like most of us from my generation, in coal-fired power plants, but soon transitioned to gas-fired generation, and then later on to renewables. So having done some CSP, some solar PV, some wind in different parts of the world, and currently I'm looking after the technology side for all the renewable technologies at ENGIE in the global business unit for renewables.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Jaideep. Maybe I pass to Laurent.
Yes, thank you, Amit. Good morning and good afternoon to you all. So my name is Laurent Wolffsheim. I'm from Total Energies. And so I'm currently running the strategy, growth, finance, biogas and hydrogen business units within the gas, renewables and power. I've been for 25 years with Total, pretty much in all the businesses across the oil and gas industry, from the upstream to refining and marketing. And for the past 2 years almost now, I've jumped into the big pool of renewables and power. Very happy to be with you and discuss this very important topic for India, which, by the way, I had the chance to live in for 2 years in Mumbai a few decades ago.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Laurent, and welcome. Passing to Venkat.
Yeah. Hi. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Amit, for giving us this opportunity to be on this panel, and really very pleased to be with this distinguished panelist that we have, and indeed a very important topic. And I mean, I think the timing cannot be better than this. We are all witnessing very unprecedented times right now. Escalating oil prices, geopolitical tensions, supply chain shortages, and back in India, we have very hot summers where the peak energy consumption, electricity consumption is really going high. And, for the first time, perhaps we have to import coal as well, right? So indeed, very challenging times. I'm sure we're going to have very interesting conversations. About me, okay, with Schneider now for 18 years, based out of Bangalore. I run the corporate strategy and sustainability strategy for India zone for Schneider. Schneider India now is close to 60 years. As a matter of fact, coming 2023, we'll celebrate our 60 years in India. So indeed, a long presence here. And in terms of Schneider India revenues, we are now the third largest for the Schneider Group worldwide, next to US and China. And we have a huge base of our resources, manufacturing, R&D. We have more than 36,000 people here. So all in all, we are all well centered to kind of help and support India and the whole ecosystem here to get into the net zero transition. Looking forward for a very interesting conversation. Amit, back to you. You're on mute. Amit, you're on mute.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Venkat, and thanks to everyone for setting it all up so beautifully, for laying out the context. One small administrative point before we start, a quick reminder to all the participants, especially those who have joined us in the last few minutes. Please do keep your video feeds off and keep your lines on mute, just so that we can focus the video on our panelists. So thank you so much. Thank you for your indulgence. And also, as we are speaking, please do share your questions via the chat session. So that way we can review these questions. And when we come to the Q&A, we will make sure we try and answer as many of these questions as possible. Thank you once again to our audience for being so patient. So let's get to it. So if I start with the first question, it's an open question for all panelists. So you have three big companies, ENGIE, Total, and Schneider Electric, all of whom are present across pretty much the whole of the value chain in energy, be it power, be it gas, be it digital and systems. So where exactly do you see the business opportunities in India, which are relevant to India's decarbonization goals? So let me just throw it out to you, and let's see who wants to pick it up. Laurent, do I see you?
Yeah.
Yeah, go on. Please go on.
Yes, thank you. Well, when it comes to energy, in the framework of the huge decarbonization challenge globally and for India specifically, you're basically in the middle of a triangle. And this triangle is about security of supply, climate issues, and price. And this is why, I guess, what's extremely complicated, but at the same time very interesting, of course, is that there is no one single solution to be looked at when it comes to this big challenge. But of course, looking at, of course, the specificities of the countries, sometimes of the regions, of the usages of energy. And I think that in the case of India, particularly, access to energy, rapid growth being obviously some of the two key features, we have to look at this triangle in a much more different way than, for example, what we are looking at in Europe. And so the point here today is really to make sure that we come with the right solutions when it comes to energy, being able to solve this equation, security of supply, so which means basically a reliable and clean energy, an affordable energy, and of course a sustainable one with less emissions. So our view at Total Energies is that all energies are necessary. It's just a matter of mix, and of course, as time will go by, we see a strong electrification of usages. Any usage that can be electrified will have to be electrified. And for those who are hard to electrify, then you will have to look at other solutions, probably new molecules like biogas or hydrogen. Maybe we'll come back to that. And of course, whenever possible, avoid emission, reduce emission, and compensate.
Super. I may come back to you in a short while to ask you some specific questions on your initiatives in these domains in India. Okay, but maybe I can pass on to Venkat and Jaideep to see if they have anything to add.
Yeah, so I pretty much agree with what Laurent has said, but just to add a couple of other thoughts from my side. So absolutely, you need the right energy mix, and then there is a soft start and a hard start. The benefit of renewables is that the time to market is very quick. So trying to develop a solar PV plant and trying to develop, let's say, wind farms is much faster. So that does help with the energy access issues and the speed at which the electrification of the country can be done is much faster. Unlike trying to build a big coal power plant and then establishing all the logistics for coal supply, etc., all the environmental clearances, all the issues much more complicated. The second thing which I feel is not being priced in properly is the impact on the environment, the climate change, and public health. So when we talk about price, which Laurent mentioned, are we actually really looking at the true price to the country? Yeah. So and that I think is something which needs to be given a bit more consideration upon. I'm sure there are experts who can work out in some broad brushes on what this impact is, but I'm quite sure that this is something which cannot be ignored for the long term, especially in a country where you have almost a terawatt of energy to be added in the coming decade, 15 years or so. So what choices are made today will be choices which will be there for the next 35 or 40 years. So it's very, very important to make the right choices on the energy mix. And I also fully agree with Laurent that, okay, you can't just forget what it is there. So maybe one transition is to put a bit more gas. Look at all with the huge agriculture in India, there's the potential for a lot of biogas to be developed. But but India doesn't have large farmers. So you need to establish the cooperatives to collect the farm residues and waste to then convert it into biogas. Or you have smaller plants with localized consumption, etc. So whole philosophy and the infrastructure around that needs to be looked at as well. So a very holistic view of the whole energy system needs to be looked at.
Indeed. Thanks very much, Jaideep. Yeah, that makes total sense. And it does, in fact, it does incentivize further questions on some of the ethical factors related to the environment, but also ethical factors related to the usage of scarce land, which can either be diverted towards food or which can be diverted towards fuel-based crops. So that's something that is a major challenge for the country to consider.
And if I could just add one more thing, Amit, very, very briefly. So India has a huge reliance on hydro. So it's got a big hydro fleet, and of course, some of it can be seasonal due to the monsoon seasons, etc. But considering the impact of climate change, hydro could be quite impacted. And of course, when you have an impact on hydro for any reason, it's not for 1 or 2 days. It lasts for a month, years, 2 years, or 3 years. So you need to have that absolute right energy mix to also ensure that we have resilience in the development of the renewable sector as well.
That's true. As glacial flows recede, you will have that kind of stress on hydro, and hydro also brings stress between countries. So that's also potential disputes that are waiting to be heard, especially as climate change gets aggravated. Thanks. Venkat, over to you.
Yeah, I think very, very, very valid points, and I completely agree on the topics of energy access, security of supply, the climate imperative. At Schneider, when we look at the whole decarbonization scenario, we look at from 2 vantage points. One is the demand side and the other one is the supply side, right? When I say demand side, it's all about the realm of energy efficiency. How can we, consume less? How can we optimize our energy ecosystems, right? How can we improve upon our energy productivity, right? So there is indeed a big scope here as well. More so when we infuse digitization, right? Now look at this whole thing, electrical energy. When we talk about, first of all, electrical energy is invisible. And energy efficiency is the absence of invisible, right? So it gets a little complicated, right? And that's where the whole digitization really kind of changes the entire landscape. So digitalization enabled energy efficiency has a big opportunity and potential on the demand side to contribute to the decarbonization. If I to state some numbers from Bureau of Energy Efficiency India, the decarbonization targets of India, perhaps more than 50% can be contributed on account of energy efficiency, right? So I think that's where I would want to spend more time maybe in the coming minutes as and when we go deeper into the conversation. I think all in all, I completely agree with what Jaideep said. India is a big country, in many ways. And in terms of emission, India is the third largest country in the world. And, a lot of development growth is all going to come our way. The per capita energy consumption or electricity consumption is going to go 8 times in next 50 years. There is also a bit of significant, not bit, a significant reliance on importing our fossil fuels and things like that. So there is a whole conversation of becoming energy independent going forward. So a lot of these things are going to play out in India. And I think all of these discussions that we're going to be having will indeed be very insightful. I will have a few more comments, but I'll reserve it for the subsequent discussion, Amit. So over back to you.
Sure, that's fine. Thanks very much. No, you're absolutely right in saying that energy efficiency is the very first port of call in any initiative on decarbonization, because a megawatt hour saved is a megawatt hour which is avoided in terms of carbon emissions. So that's absolutely right. And when you speak of digitalization as well, yeah, people talk about digitalization, and just to put in simple terms for the audience, digitalization basically means using data to make better or more intelligent decisions, whether it be to the operation of a building or of a site, or whether it be to improving the operation of power plants or specific pieces of equipment. So it's just using data to make better decisions on site. And because you've got connectivity, which is becoming a lot easier, and India, in fact, has one of the cheapest telecom rates in the world, you can see the impact of connectivity in many different sectors. And of course, that impact will be seen in the energy sector as well, because data is easier to move around and therefore it's easier to incorporate into decisions on sites. And I think that will spell the next revolution in India's energy journey.
Amit, very well said. In fact, that was my script.
Oh, is it? Sorry, I did not mean to steal your thunder. I see Laurent has raised his arm. Yes, Laurent, please go on.
Yeah, no, just maybe to come back on one very important comment from Jaideep, is that what's at the same time extremely exciting and very complicated when it comes to energy issues is that you have at the same time to deal with very long cycles and make sure that you have a good plan going forward, having a view of your energy mix, because clearly you need to know exactly where you want to go, taking into account, as Venkat said, by the way, expectations or forecast when demand is concerned, and how are you going to respond to that. And at the same time, oil, gas, power are commodities with sometimes very significant bumps in terms of prices. Everybody's aware of what's happening right now after what happened 2 years ago at the start of the pandemic, when we saw in particular hydrocarbon prices going to the cave. And so I think that the role of the authorities in particular are quite key, because you need to have at one point in time in a country a body who is in charge of being able to plan and to make sure that all the stakeholders in the energy system are going to deliver what they expect. And I don't know if this is something that you want to come back a bit later, but I think that clearly this is having this kind of body who is able to forecast and drive the system going forward is also a very strong enabler.
Indeed.
I mean, if I may add just one point, I know I'll not take much time. Laura did mention right in the beginning, the whole vector of electrification is also going to be very, very crucial, especially for a country like India. I made a brief mention, right? Our per capita electricity consumption is going to multiply, by a factor of, I don't know, 7 to 8 times in next 30, 40 years. So today, globally, if you see, electricity is just about 18-20% of the final energy mix. Right. So going forward, as Laura said, there's going to be a lot of electrification happening. The debate is not about electrons versus molecules, but for sure, electrification is there on the horizon, which is going to accelerate because that's a very, very important vector of decarbonization. And we'll see big time the same happening in India. So that was my topic on electrification. So the way we see electrification and digital. So perhaps in coming years, not only India, but perhaps world, we'll see more electric and more digital as the primary discussion points on the whole decarbonization topic.
No, indeed. And there, the challenge is to make sure that the grid can absorb all of that extra electricity and especially the intermittent electricity. Absolutely. And it gets into questions of whether we should go with the centralized grid model or whether we should skip that and go to a decentralized grid model in India. So all of these questions come out. I'm sure none of these questions have answers that can be said on this panel, but I would be keen to hear your thoughts on the same, given that all three of you are involved in both centralized grid businesses as well as decentralized businesses. So I'm keen to get some specifics from you on your initiatives here.
So, Amit, if I could add a little bit to that. So unlike fossil generation, where you can bring the fuel to where the demand is, you can't bring the wind and the sunshine. Yeah. So you can bring biogas most probably, or you can bring in hydrogen, or e-fuels, but you can't bring the wind and sunshine. So I guess in the end, there will be a balance. There will be some decentralized distributed generation and there will be centralized generation. So you will see the two directional flows rather than a unidirectional flow, along with a lot of storage coming up. So I think to say that one is going to be the only solution, I think that's very premature to take that kind of view, at least from that's my feeling. And secondly, to just add something on energy efficiency. This is just to share a thought. Whenever people get energy for free, they don't value it. Whatever you get for free is not valued and is wasted. I saw that when I was working in the Middle East. People had tropical rainforests growing in their house because the water was so subsidized or given for free. And I think when we talk about energy efficiency, people will only start exercising that in India if there is the political will as well to stop all this cross-subsidization of free energy supplies and stuff like that. So, and also industry is given incentives to ensure that they are also improving their energy efficiency.
Indeed, and that creates a segue to the second leg of our session here, which is about the key enablers. So what do you think are the most critical enablers of this transition? So you mentioned one of them, Jaideep, which is to begin eliminating all the cross subsidies and make sure that the prices are actually reflective, not just of the underlying costs of the commodity, but also which factor in some of the externalities, the environmental externalities. So with that as an opening salvo, I'll just pass it to all of you to say, okay, so what do you think as the key enablers for the businesses that you are engaged in?
So I'll leave it to Laurent and Venkat to start first, and then I'll add my own 2 penny in it.
Okay, I can start if you want. Well, clearly, what we have the opportunity, obviously, to have a footprint in over 100 countries globally. So it's very interesting, I think, maybe to share with you what we see are clearly things which are working well and things that probably should be avoided in terms of transition. So you've already, I guess, mentioned it, Jaideep. Clearly, the ability to access to land when it comes to renewables is absolutely key. And so obviously this is something that needs to be organized. The permitting system is something which we witness is sometimes clearly a pain point when you want to quickly develop renewables. Secondly, access to the grid. So meaning that, of course, you need a grid, you need a solid grid, you need a grid which can absorb the intermittency. I guess it was already mentioned. and maybe we'll come back to the role of energy storage a bit later. Then obviously you need regulation which allows at the same time to be able to have some purchase power agreements with customers who are willing to develop those kinds of contracts, or at the same time tenders which are organized by regulatory bodies like utilities or electricity boards. And finally, but this is something that should not be avoided, a skilled workforce locally to be able to develop those projects is absolutely key.
Very good. Thanks. Thanks, Laurent. All of it makes sense. Venkat, you want to add to that?
Yeah, quick 2-3 enablers. Tech is one which we kind of started off. The whole demand side management of energy, and also to a large extent infusing renewable energy onto the grid, which is, as Jaideep was saying, it's highly intermittent, right, and cyclic, right? So digital technology definitely is going to play a big role. And to my mind, we have the technology available to us. It's not that we have to wait for some inventions to happen. I think we have at our disposal technology to enable all these things to become more, let's say, sustainable and green. So that's one enabler. And you talked about data, and in the context of India, you see India otherwise is a very digitally savvy society, right? Today we have possibly one of the second largest internet users in India, and there is this whole jam trinity that we talk about. For everyone to understand, jam is nothing but it's a kind of a stack which integrates 3 important elements of country. First, the biometric identity of all the citizens. Today we have close to 1.18 billion citizens of India on their biometric database is in place. Then we have the telephony. We have a huge amount of telephone penetration. We have close to 1 billion plus mobile phone users. And the third important element is banking, right? Banking has kind of deeply penetrated. So this creates a very, very solid digital infrastructure, which perhaps may not be visible when you move out on the streets of India, but this is what is one which has leapfrogged the whole architecture. This is about the citizens, the society. Now we are talking about energy, enterprises, operations, which are fairly complex. It is not as easy as using a phone and getting onto YouTube, right? So I think the whole technological digital culture exists. We're soon going to have our 5G use cases and 5G launch maybe in a couple of months' time, maybe on 15th August. So I think all the nuts and bolts are falling in place. And I'm of the view that this digital whole evolving ecosystem will really going to leapfrog the energy and the whole sustainability ecosystem of India. So that's about the digital tech. The other enabler, to my mind, are the evolving business models. There are different business models. I've been in business. We do this energy efficiency and sustainability business with our customers in India. So we have been evolving different business models like, energy efficiency as a service, right? We share the savings with our customers, right? So this is one model. Recently, we launched renewable energy and microgrid as a service, right? Which is called as Green Next. This has been targeted for, let's say, mid-size commercial and industrial buildings, maybe about 1.5 megawatt of solar on site. This is all capex taken care by Schneider, a typical PPA where we provide renewable energy with storage and a microgrid architecture. So this has been a recent launch, again, a new business model which we are trying it out. Initial response has been phenomenal. You talked about data. I'm sure there are companies who are working on data as a service, insight as a service. So I think these evolving business models are also going to be of great importance, especially when we talk about, we see MSME, right? Micro, small, medium enterprises. We have a huge MSME ecosystem in India. About 60 million MSMEs exist in India, both in manufacturing as well as in service industry, contributing to 1/3 of GDP. They are also emitters of CO2. Now, these evolving business models is something which is going to really help this sector also to get decarbonized. Just to summarize, digital tech and business models, I think these are two key enablers.
Thank you so much, Venkat. It makes so much sense. And yes, I think if I replay or characterize your enablers in a different way, it's enablers are those that can actually address the pain points of the customers and make it easier for them to adopt these solutions. So when you say energy efficiency as a service, for instance, or renewables as a service, it allows the customer to remove the pain point of capex allocation for these businesses, and then allows them to deploy these solutions far quicker at their site. So that's an excellent example. So thank you so much, Venkat. Jaideep, you want to come back to you?
So just to add to what Laurent and Venkat has said, and I will add my 2 penny as an asset owner and developer, which is different to being one as a supplier. So ultimately, we're suppliers of energy. So we're providing a service, but we also own the asset. So what is very critical when you're building infrastructure, which is going to last several years, is firstly having the right enablers in terms of law, jurisdiction, all the, so I'm not going to go into land, etc. That's already mentioned by Laurent, but also to look at how strong is the sanctity of your contract, how creditworthy is your counterparty, and if not, how is that made creditworthy in terms of whether it's through escrow accounts or whether it's through some form of some guarantee from somewhere to make those entities creditworthy, and enforcement of the same. Also, India has a great vision. Always India has come out with great visions. It falls short on implementation for a whole host of reasons. So even when we talk about the central vision of the country, I think alignment between the center and the states and overall energy policy is extremely important, especially now when we are talking about with the grid infrastructure coming up, a lot of cross-state flows. We are already having all these ISDC types of developments, interstate transmission connection types of developments. So when you're moving power across, you want to make sure, and you build something, you want to make sure that it's going to last the test of time. And lastly, simplification of even the labor laws is quite important to formalize labor. India has a huge labor force. Most of it is informal. And I don't think that's great for the labor. That's not great for training of the labor. That's not great for the societal development. So as an ESG oriented company, I would say it's also important to make sure that the formalization of the labor force takes place and it's not used as a weapon, but used as an enabler.
That's right. No, it just makes sense, and it fills in all of the points that were covered by both Laurent and Venkat.
If I may just
sure, please.
At the point on the, I think that's absolutely a key point, because when you talk about energy transition, we've been talking about a lot of different items, but eventually what's really key is to make sure that this transition is fair. And in particular, the key feature of renewables, which at the same time is quite a disadvantage, it's that it's a very local energy. You can bring oil and to a certain extent, thanks to LNG, gas from pretty much everywhere in the world. A wind or solar resource is fundamentally a local one. And so I think that there is a very important opportunity, I would say, for the people to empower themselves with this energy transition, because they can feel that the resource is there. And so I guess our role, I would say, as a group of companies working in the energy sector, is how do we empower the people to make sure that they can have access to this energy.
Absolutely, makes sense. I mean, you see, I think Jaideep, you referred to the Middle East earlier, and there it's a perfect example. That is, as long as you're dealing with global commodities, you may have geomilitary adventurism in that area, but as soon as you move to local businesses, local resources, which can only be used sensibly by the local population, the whole paradigm shifts, and then it really becomes a local case, and then it's about how you can best involve the local people, not just as users and consumers, but also to create jobs, to create or to kickstart the engine of the economy, and especially when you are moving that economy towards decarbonized sources. I see Laurent has raised his hand once again, but I'll just make one extra point. You've covered everything, but there's one gap, which is the actual underlying energy technologies themselves. So as enablers, where do you see the most promising new technologies which can then engender these new businesses? So anything new in the solar domain or in the wind domain or in hydrogen, for instance, there's lots of buzz, but I think it'll be good to filter out the actual opportunities from the buzz.
So if I could add to that, Amit, so just looking at, for example, even existing technologies. So I would not call solar PV and wind anymore as emerging technologies. They're very well established. We've got hundreds of gigawatts, if not terawatts of these installations across the world. What we have seen is that because of different reasons, as I once mentioned to you about the frugality on how development is done in India, we are not picking up the right developments in terms of the technology uptake. So when the world moved to bifacial, India is just moving to bifacial now. Everywhere people have started using trackers where the sunshine is above a certain level, a certain irradiation. India is just beginning to make that transition now. So there are already technologies existing which we haven't taken benefit of. But of course, now with the commodity pricing issues, some of these technologies will automatically be pushed through, because you need to valorize whatever you have in an expensive environment to sweat it a bit more. So we will see these solutions. So not only energy efficiency in terms of consumption, but also how you generate more from the same resource is something which was missing in India. And I think that's beginning to come. And for that, India has a massive opportunity with the hundreds of gigawatts to be added. All this manufacturing can be done in India. All the raw materials are available. The labor force can be trained. You have the ability to set up factories. You have the ability to transport. It just needs a bit of drive. I think that, and on top of that, what we need to make sure is that we don't take sudden measures, like putting in a very high tariff all of a sudden to say, okay, this is going to kickstart local manufacturing. You need to do it in steps. You need to have, the government did try that, to be fair to them, but I think it needs to be given a bit more thought. Otherwise, we will derail some of the decarbonization processes and add a bit of delay in it. Yeah, so that's one thing. Along with some other technologies, of course, digital is key to all of this. And I think the other technology which is very important as we go for much higher penetrations of renewable, as is beginning to happen in some states, is storage. So the country is very aware of it. You can see that they're talking a lot about storage. Also, when we have very large amounts of renewable added, by default, you will end up with curtailment at certain times of the day or months or whatever. That curtailment doesn't necessarily need to happen. You could store it, you can convert it to hydrogen, you can valorize it in other ways. So those are the other technology elements which would automatically come in, what we would typically call as sector coupling. So you'd see all the different sectors coming together. So we would, in the future, this is at least my view, we would not have an energy system which we call as power or gas or whatever. It'll be one large homogeneous energy system, which is all very interlinked and interconnected, including the process industry, because you would have hydrogen, which is going to, let's say, to manufacture of fertilizers, for example, in the future. Yeah, so all sorts of different things, sector coupling will automatically happen. And this is where you need to really think about and plan for what technologies do you need to develop internally, what can you buy from outside. There is no point in trying to reinvent the wheel all the time. You need to see how you can accelerate and do a technology jump rather than just wasting your time. And really have a broad vision document on all the different industries and how the needs are and how they can be coupled to work together.
Super. Here is important points that I would like to develop, but Laurent, in the meantime, has been very patient. Laurent, please.
No, that's fine. Those are very good points, obviously. No, there are some technological breakthroughs that can really make a change, for sure, even if some of the technologies in renewables are already mature. But clearly, we see for example, in the wind sector, clearly plants are getting even bigger, and for sure, which means that for already installed wind plants, you can repower them. So you don't have the issue of the access to the land, but you can, with the same acreage, increase dramatically the available capacity. So that can make really a change. You can do the same, by the way, with PV by gradually upgrading and repowering some plants over time. So that's something that's definitely going to happen. There are some huge expectations when it comes to energy storage and hybrid. It's not easy to say hybridization, which means how do you couple different sources of energy to make them a very efficient system using obviously digital, which is also going to make a lot of change, because we're seeing some very quick technological breakthroughs coming here as well when it comes to forecasting the weather, whether or not you're going to have some clouds coming over your PV plant, and how you're going to manage the portfolio of assets using digital tools is also going to make a significant change. And finally, just to finish on one thing, solid state batteries would also definitely make a dramatic change as well. Not talking about the overall hydrogen, ammonia, and all the e-fuel derivatives, which are only at the beginning of their life.
Indeed, and you can think of so many examples. So when we talk about hybrid, for instance, yes, there is solar and wind hybrid plants, which then allow us to use the negative correlation between the different between the availabilities of the two resources. Or you can talk of, for instance, layering different solar materials on top of each other to improve the yield, the megawatt hour yield of a solar cell per unit area. So what Jaideep was mentioning, how to squeeze out more out of the given land that is available. So one example which is being explored is that of layering, let's say, perovskites over crystalline silicon to create tandem solar cells, which have a lot higher efficiency than usual. So and then when you look at other forms of innovation in technology, just to stay on the example of perovskites, you can have different levels or different types of manufacturing techniques as well. You can either vapor deposit perovskites. You can manufacture via slot die coating. You can manufacture via screen printing, and all of these innovations are coming into play, which can create materials for different use cases. So either utility scale large solar plants, or it can be very targeted smaller solar cells, which can be used for building integrated photovoltaics, or which can go in various forms of deployment. So all of this is very interesting developments that are happening at a global level, but we also see companies that are doing this kind of innovation in the Indian context as well. If you look at batteries, for instance, there's vanadium redox flow batteries, there's sodium sulfide batteries that are coming on, and I'm sure all of these are looking at different use cases for deployment, both power storage and energy storage. I mean, I could go on with multiple points, and in fact, everything that you say creates about 10 different questions for me as well. But hang on, let me just check with the audience. I haven't seen any questions from the audience yet. So just keeping track of the time, we've got about 12 minutes. Audience members, if you have any burning questions, this is the time to raise those questions. Please do put them in the chat, and we will keep looking at them. In the meantime, I will happily go on with my questions as well to the panelists. So apart from the looking at the enablers of the transition, we have of course been also discussing various gaps that need to be filled, and you have looked at gaps in relation to land acquisition, gaps in relation to regulatory reform. There's one part which, unless I'm mistaken, we haven't yet covered, which is access to financing. And there, normally in the West or even in places in Asia, in Singapore, the good thing is it's easy to find financing access for various initiatives, and in fact, there's a whole financing ecosystem that is in play. What do you see in India? Do you see this as one of the gaps as well, or do you think India is moving in the right direction here?
So Amit, if I could add to that, accessing finance in India for the right project is not a problem. So there is quite a lot of money available if you have the right project. Of course, you have periods in between where you've had a problem. But at one point, State Bank of India was the largest project finance institution in the world, if you remember, for a few years. So for the right project, with the right structure, there is no problem of securing finance. I think what is more important is how the financing industry also structures itself, in the sense that it's not the most friendly way to secure finance. So we are very used to a system in which, say, you have a technical bank, an MLA, a main technical bank or whatever, or a bookkeeping bank. In India, for every drawdown, you have to go and access each bank for separately. So you can, if you have a large project in which you have, let's say, 30, 35 banks who are lending you money, you have to repeat the effort 35 times over. Rather than actually doing it once. So these are the kind of things I think which need to be improved in the financing industry as good practice, which is established everywhere. I don't think the practices in India are wrong. They're just a bit traditional. Yeah. So they need to move on with time, and the banking industry, though banks are a lot more accessible than they used to be, but still not that friendly in that sense.
Get it. Get it. Thanks very much, Jaideep. Very pragmatic proposals, I would say. A couple of questions have come up in the meantime, or related to the hydrogen economy. So the first question related to green hydrogen. So what makes it green? I think the immediate answer that I can have to that is that green hydrogen is, by its very definition, is hydrogen which is manufactured via electricity supplied from renewable sources. So it's electrolysis that is used to make the hydrogen, and there it relies on renewable energy contracts. That's the immediate level 0 answer I can provide. Maybe I can pass it to the audience, the panelists. I think Laurent had raised his arm on that one. Go on.
Well, what's key when you're looking at the different solutions, whether it's power coming from renewables, hydrogen, biogas, and of course all the existing energies today, is what's the life cycle analysis, and for sure all energies at one point in time have an impact on the environment, and so the target is to make this impact as low as possible. By the way, because when you're doing this, and that's an important point, I don't know if we this is something to be mentioned for sure, that when it comes to green hydrogen, for example, as you just said, Amit, there is also the question of access to water. Yeah. Which is not a small issue. So this is, I would say, overall, what we are looking at is really to make sure that what we are building for the coming decades is sustainable. So I think that overall, when you take all the impacts of establishing new energy systems, whether it's a PV plant, or wind power plant, hydrogen-based systems, biogas, it's really to make sure that we do this full analysis, and to make sure also that the stakeholders, notably in the supply chain, are also virtuous when it comes to the way that they are producing the different components. So that's basically how you can define a green system. I would say a more sustainable system, if you will.
You're absolutely right, Laurent. And in fact, it ties back to Jaideep's point made earlier about the coupling of different industries. So one of the important couplings is the coupling between the power and the water sectors, given that we are increasingly going to rely on desalination of a source of water. And the biggest cost of desalination is the energy costs. So it really depends on how well we can look at energy, both from the perspective of the procurement of water, and also the usage of water in our energy choices as well. Because if you look at coal and nuclear, for instance, they have a huge water footprint. So coal has this double whammy of having a large carbon footprint as well as a large water footprint. And that's the other problem with India's coal dependency as well. So you're absolutely right in pointing to the role of water in this whole water energy nexus. The second question that I had on hydrogen was related to the position of
Venkat,
hydrogen.
Venkat,
Yes. Okay. I'll just
Yeah,
hold my question.
please go ahead.
Venkat and then Laurent.
Sure.
Venkat, yes, go on. Please go on.
No, Amit, what I was, again, I'll go back to my point, when we talk about hydrogen, you need water, right? And access to water hence becomes very important point. If you talk about, let's say, biofuels or ethanol, again, the same debate of the land that we use to cultivate food or the land that we use to cultivate energy sources, right?
Yeah.
You talk about renewable powered by solar. Again, the question of land, where do we have that much land to put so much of solar, right? So this is, so the whole energy ecosystem will always have these kind of mutually two opposing situations. My point again, just bear with me, the overall sensitivity and consciousness about every energy user is, I think, very important. Always using less energy, whatever form of that energy is definitely going to be playing a big role in overall sustainability and decarbonization. So that's where the whole awareness and being energy conscious and having a lifestyle which is kind of very sustainable lifestyle frankly goes a long way. And I think time has come for us to look at this very seriously and go all out onto this. So Amit, back to you. Sorry about that.
Yeah, so Amit, just to add a couple of things. As you know, there are many colors of hydrogen. So you have green, pink, turquoise, blue, white, gray and black and brown, depending on what source of energy is used to make it. So so that's one
There's
thing.
Yellow as well from nuclear. But okay.
So the yellow is from sunshine and nuclear is pink.
Okay.
so from solar. So and then you have white, which is naturally occurring hydrogen, and black, which is from coal gasification. So anyway, so you've got different forms of hydrogen production. So green hydrogen obviously only uses renewable energy, but the points on water are very well made. Just one thing on co-developments and other types of sector coupling and looking at pressures on land, etc. So there are other developments in PV, not so much in wind, I would say, which is, let's say, agri-PV. How do you co-use the land to drive to developments? And there are certain crops which do better with PV on top and certain which will do worse. So you really have to make the right choice of which PV selection, which module selection, what orientation, what height, which type of crop to then. So it's a scientific exercise, and so agri-PV in the beginning was perhaps not very well thought through, and perhaps one of the I would say more abused things, which literally led to change of use of land. So if it is done properly, it needs to be done and properly managed and demonstrated first, and then take it forward. But it could create a win-win situation for both the farmer and for the energy producer.
Super. Thank you so much, Jaideep.
Yes, and if I may add something on this very important point, I think what's key here again is that you have the opportunity to empower the people and to see how you can build a circular economy.
Yes.
Using in particular agricultural waste, turning it into energy. Then you get digested that you can use as a local fertilizer. So, I mean, there is clearly a virtuous circle here. And so we are, I mean, our role, and this is what we want to do, obviously, is to make sure that this can happen.
Great. And it's actually pointing towards the theme of the convergence of different sectors, of different industries, so that you can't really be an expert in one without understanding more holistically how it impacts the other sectors as well. So that's a great message. It would be great to end on this. I'm just doing my best in the last 2 minutes to accommodate as many questions as possible. So there was the first question that came was on hydrogen fuel stations. Maybe I'll just take this question myself, as imperfect as my answer may be. So I do know that hydrogen has a limited use case in mobility, but it's I think more limited towards say commercial buses or towards large trucking solutions. So there, I know that India is piloting hydrogen fuel stations, but I think it stays at the pilot stage right now. That's number one. There's a second interesting question which I will push to you, to all of you. The question is, do the panelist companies finance startups that are in eco-sustainability? I know that the answer is yes, but I will leave you to provide more flavor. I'll ask a complementary question to that. I know that Total, for instance, apart from startups, they have invested heavily in one of the big players as well, Adani. So it'll be nice to get some commentary on that as well. But first, the question on the eco-sustainability startups. I saw Venkat had raised his hand the fastest.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I'll be short. Yeah, we have a very structured program globally called Innovation at the Edge, where we work with the startups, right? And those startups which have a kind of a technology or a story which is not core of our business right now, right? Which is adjacency of our business. So yes, Innovation at the Edge is a program, and in the let's say in Asia, we have about 5 or 6 of the startups that we have kind of partnered with. And we are working very closely. So most welcome, reach out to us.
Yeah. And as far as ENGIE is concerned, we have what we call as ENGIE New Ventures. So we have a venture capital fund, and we normally fund 6 to 7 startups per year. And in the past, we were doing exactly what Venkat was mentioning, looking at companies which were not our core business. So trying to look at what we can do on the edge and move the core a little bit, but more and more we're concentrating on what is really down to our real raison d'etre, and do stuff which is closer to our own business, and work with those types of startups, whether it's for energy efficiency, whether it's for improvement in operational performance, whether it's building new technologies to as enablers for, let's say, green technology, decarbonization, etc., whether it's new hydrogen production technologies, etc.
Yeah, and just a quick comment as well. So actually, it's a good time to mention it because on Monday I had the opportunity with our CEO to inaugurate our startup accelerator here in Paris. For a new cohort of 10 startups. So yes, we need, I would say, we need to join forces, obviously, and startups will be important stakeholders for this. I would say what I was mentioning before, and the ability to predict very, very precisely whether or not clouds are going to impair your PV production is actually something which is worked very hard by startups, because there is a lot of machine learning, a lot of innovation to come from that. So there is a lot to come clearly from startups. And finally, for sure, Total Energies, you know, we have very strong ambitions here in India, as we've done a lot in the past, because we know this is a very successful path. We need to find the good partners, and yes, we joined forces with Adani, and frankly, we are quite impressed by the ability of Adani to develop this new energy mix here in India.
Lovely. Well, thank you very much to all of you. I'm so sorry. I apologize to the audience members whose questions I haven't been able to answer, but we have already exceeded our time. I must say, in one regard, I'm quite disappointed by our panelists because they haven't really disagreed with each other so much. So everything that they said seemed to be very congruent with each other, and in fact supplemented each other's points of view. So in a sense, I'm disappointed, but in a sense, it also shows that the industry is coming together with one single mindset, and the path forward is relatively clear. There may be some differences in the choices of business, but in the overall direction and in the overall philosophy on large businesses versus startups, whether it's asset businesses versus services businesses, whether it's business models that are predicated on sharing the pain points of customers versus business models that can allow faster execution, even if that compromises returns to a certain extent. So we need everything. We don't need one or the other, and I think that's the view that we seem to be coming with. Well, I'm just overwhelmed by the level of debate that I've had here, and I just would like to thank the panelists very profusely from the bottom of my heart. Thank the audience as well, and actually I would like to leave the last word to my panelists before we say goodbye to all of you. So once again, in alphabetical order, maybe I hand over to Jaideep and then to Laurent and to Venkat.
So thank you very much, Amit. I think a great discussion. So thank you for the opportunity. But just to add, we are living in a very VUCA world, volatile, uncertain, chaotic. So in this type of environment, of course, you're seeing that it's important to now see that the industry is coming together because there's a common way of thinking in negotiating this highly volatile and uncertain environment. And I think that's a very positive development to us. And I think this is not only limited to companies, this is also limited to government. This is also extended to governments and states. So we are seeing the same kind of thought process happening. And in fact, the biggest accelerator for change are the governments. They are the biggest enablers of making these things happen. And we can see that willingness across the world and certainly in India as well.
Well, again, thank you for having the opportunity to have this very lively discussion. Thank you. And frankly, my final word would be to say that I'm really optimistic when I see the speed, the pace at which change is happening globally. And I believe that we are, as a group of companies, yes, we even if we still are competitors and competition is good, we can still find ways to join forces to make the change happen.
Right. Amit, again, I kind of repeat all what my panelists have said. Thank you very much. I enjoyed being here. Thanks a lot. One point, all of the commitments of the world that we see, picking up from what Jaideep talked about the climate imperative, today we are still on a trajectory of 2.4 to 2.7 degrees Celsius, so far as global warming is concerned. And this is not what we want, right? The overall endeavor is to get back to the right trajectory of 1.5 degree by the end of this century. And I think all that we discussed in a way are pointing towards the same goal. We have the intent, we have the wherewithal, and we are now building upon our awareness of doing all these things in a very congruent way. I think that's the way forward. It's just that we need to multiply and join hands, and that's about it. So I leave it at that.
Thank you so much. On that note of urgency and optimism, let me thank you all once again on behalf of the Franco Indienne Chamber of Commerce. And we look forward to having you once again on our next calls, on our next panel discussions. We will post a recording on LinkedIn and also on our website. I will get back to you with the specific details in future, but for the moment, thank you so much. It was a wonderful, wonderful discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank
Have
you,
a great
everyone.
week ahead. Bye-bye.